Since the invention of airplanes, there have been multiple air crashes that will have claimed thousands of lives. And no matter how much you take safety measures or security checks, there's always a leak in care which results in disaster. Reasons are always there, but it's pretty messed up that we can't control everything even now. So many crashes have happened with so many people dead. But what has been the deadliest crash in the history of aviation? Stick to the end of the video to find your answer. Hello and welcome to Plane Crashes Explained, where we discuss the most mind-blowing reasons and facts behind the most heinous plane crashes. Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so you don't miss future updates. Without further ado, let's get straight into this. It was a world-shaking occurrence. Two Boeing 747s crashed on a fog-shrouded runway on a windswept island in the Atlantic Ocean, killing 583 people. The account of the world's biggest aviation disaster has been recounted and retold numerous times since then by the few lucky survivors and the firefighters. They raced into the fog, unaware of the magnitude of the calamity. By the investigators who put together the cause, journalists and authors who felt driven to inform the world what had happened, and sociologists and behavioral scientists who wanted to know why people make errors. Both flights made an unscheduled stop in Tenerife. Gran Canaria Airport, also known as Las Palmas Airport or Gando Airport, which serves Las Palmas on the nearby island of Gran Canaria, was their destination. Both islands are part of the Canary Islands, a Spanish autonomous community off the coast of Morocco in the Atlantic Ocean. Pan Am Flight 1736 had taken off from Los Angeles International Airport with a stopover at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. The plane was a Boeing 747-121 called Clipper Victor, with the registration Nancy 736 Papa Alpha. 14 of the 380 passengers, mainly retirees with 2 children, had boarded in New York, where the crew had also been altered. Captain Victor Grubbs, 56, First Officer Robert Bragg, 39, Flight Engineer George Warrens, 46, and 13 flight attendants made up the new crew. Grubbs had over 21,000 hours of flying time at the time of the disaster, with 564 hours on the Boeing 747. Bragg has a total of 10,800 flying hours, almost 2,800 of which were on the 747. Warrens had a total of 15,210 flying hours, 559 of which were on the 747. On January 22, 1970, this exact plane flew the first commercial 747 trips. It was also the first 747 to be hijacked on August 2, 1970, while en route from JFK to Luis Muñoz Marin International Airport in San Juan, Puerto Rico. It was diverted to Jose Mart International Airport in Havana, Cuba. Los Rodeos was a small rural airport that couldn't handle the influx of traffic from Gran Canaria, including 5 huge planes. There was just one runway at the airport, with one major taxiway running parallel to it and 4 short taxiways linking the two. The diverted jets took up so much room while waiting for Gran Canaria Airport to reopen that they were forced to park on the long taxiway, rendering it unusable for taxiing. Instead, departing aircraft had to back taxi or retreat along the runway to position themselves for takeoff. The authorities reopened Gran Canaria Airport once the bomb danger had been neutralized. The Pan Am jet was set to take off from Tenerife, but a KLM plane and a refueling vehicle were blocking the runway. The KLM pilot had elected to fully refuel at Los Rodeos rather than Las Palmas to save time. Due to a lack of safe clearance between the two planes, which was only 3.7 meters, the Pan Am aircraft could not maneuver past the refueling KLM to reach the runway for departure, 12 feet. The refueling took around 35 minutes and the passengers returned to the plane. The trip was further delayed due to the hunt for a missing Dutch family of 4 who had not returned to the waiting KLM jet. Rabina van Landschot, a tour guide, had decided not to reboard for the trip to Las Palmas since she resided in Tenerife and believed flying to Gran Canaria to return to Tenerife the next day was impractical. As a result, she was not aboard the KLM airliner when the tragedy occurred, and she would be the only survivor of those on Flight 4805 from Amsterdam to Tenerife. Los Rodeos Airport is at 633 meters above sea level, which gives rise to weather conditions that differ from that at many other airports. Clouds at 600 meters above ground level at the nearby coast are at ground level at Los Rodeos. Drifting clouds of different densities cause wildly varying visibilities, from unhindered at one moment to below the minimums the next. The collision took place in a high-density cloud. Almost as soon as they stepped onto the runway, the Pan Am crew encountered poor and quickly decreasing visibility. According to the ALPA report, visibility was around 500 meters as the Pan Am plane taxied to the runway. It dropped to fewer than 100 meters shortly after they turned onto the runway. The KLM captain immediately increased the throttles after lining up, and the plane began moving forward. First Officer Muurs informed him that he had not yet received ATC clearance, to which Captain Veldhuizen van Zanten replied, "No, I'm aware of that. Go ahead and inquire." Muurs then radioed the towers saying that they were ready for takeoff and awaiting ATC approval. Following then, the KLM crew got orders specifying the route the plane would travel after takeoff. Although the instructions included the term takeoff, they did not explicitly indicate that they were cleared for takeoff. Mutual interference on the radio frequency created by a simultaneous radio call from the Pan Am crew was audible in the KLM cockpit as a 3-second-long harsh sound, or heterodyne. As a result, the KLM crew missed the essential second half of the tower's reaction. The interference also rendered this communication inaudible to the KLM crew. Either message would have informed the crew of the problem and given them time to abandon the takeoff attempt if it had been heard in the KLM cockpit. "There he is," the Pan Am captain said as he noticed the KLM landing lights through the fog as his jet neared exit C4, according to the cockpit voice recorder. Captain Grubbs cried when it became evident that the KLM aircraft was approaching at takeoff speed. "Get off! That son of a bitch is coming!" exclaimed First Officer Robert Bragg. "Get out of here! Get out of here, Captain Grubbs! Get out of here! Get out of here!" Captain Grubbs pushed full force to the throttles to avoid the oncoming crash and made an immediate left maneuver towards the grass. When the KLM 747 took off, it was within 100 meters of the Pan Am and traveling at around 140 knots. However, its nose landing gear cleared the Pan Am, and its left side engine's lower fuselage and main landing gear collided with the Pan Am's upper right side fuselage, ripping the Pan Am aircraft apart nearly straight above the wing. The Pan Am's right side engine slammed into the top deck directly behind the cockpit. The KLM airliner stayed flying for a short time after the accident. However, the outer left engine was torn off, the inner left engine absorbed substantial amounts of shredded components, and the wings were damaged. The jet instantly went into a stall, rolled quickly, and collided with the Earth some 150 meters away, rolling down the runway for another 300 meters. In the collision, both planes were destroyed. The fire and explosions caused by the fuel spilled and ignited in the collision killed all 248 passengers and staff members on the KLM airliner, and 335 passengers and crew members on the Pan Am plane. The captain, first officer, and flight engineer were among the 61 passengers and crew members that survived the Pan Am flight. Through gaps in the fuselage structure, the Pan Am survivors stepped out onto the undamaged left wing, the side farthest from the crash. Despite First Officer Bragg's plan to cut off the Pan Am's engines, they continued to operate for a few minutes after the crash. The top half of the cockpit, which housed the engine switches, was damaged in the crash, and all control cables were cut, leaving the flight crew with no way of controlling the aircraft's systems. Survivors awaited rescue, but it took longer than expected since firefighters were first unaware that 2 planes were involved and were focused on the KLM accident hundreds of meters away in the heavy fog and smoke. Most of the survivors on the wing eventually fell to the earth below. In Amsterdam's Westgaard Cemetery, a Dutch national memorial and last resting place for the victims of the KLM jet are placed. Westminster Memorial Park and Mortuary in Westminster, California also has a memorial. As a result of the tragedy, major modifications to international airline laws and aircraft were undertaken. Around the world, aviation authorities have imposed standards for standard terms and a greater focus on English as a common working language. That's all for today. If you found this video interesting, give us a thumbs up and don't forget to share the video with your friends and family. Thank you for watching.